On this Sunday night, the deadly mass shooting in Nova Scotia. For 12 hours, a gunman disguised as a Mountie terrorized the community.
This is one of the most senseless acts of violence in our province's history.
Several people killed, including a member of the RCMP. Tonight, what we're learning about the accused gunman. Planning for a pandemic exit.
If the curve continues, we would be able to look at bringing kids back to classrooms.
The strategy to slowly but surely get Canada back on track. Plus, the outbreak at an Alberta oil sands camp sparks concerns the virus will spread unless there's rapid testing.
Global National with Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin tonight with breaking news out of Nova Scotia, where a gunman went on a shooting rampage. Right now, police say 14 people are dead, including the suspect. The community is in shock and the Mounties are grieving the loss of one of their own. Constable Heidi Stevenson.
2 children have lost their mother, and a husband has lost his wife. Parents have lost their daughter, and countless others lost an incredible friend and colleague.
Police were first alerted to shots being fired at a home last night. That's where they found multiple victims. The gunman then apparently went to other houses in the area. Some were set on fire. And tonight we are learning the suspect was wearing what appeared to be an RCMP uniform and was driving what looked like a police car. But he was no Mountie. Our coverage begins with Ross Lord.
A trail of burnt-out vehicles and houses are just some of the grisly evidence of a shocking rampage that started overnight and continued for almost 13 hours along a stretch of small Nova Scotia villages.
We worried all night, not knowing what was going on with the police presence and the fires with no fire trucks.
Just before midnight, RCMP tweeted they were responding to a firearms complaint in the tiny village of Portapique, about an hour-and-a-half drive from Halifax. They told the public to stay in their homes with doors locked. 8 hours later, RCMP said they remain on scene in an active shooter investigation, repeating the order for residents to stay inside and lock their doors. They then identified the suspect as 51-year-old Gabriel Wortman, and that there were several victims. By late morning, they tweeted Wortman may be driving what appears to be an RCMP vehicle and wearing an RCMP uniform. A short time later, they reported Wortman was driving a small SUV traveling southbound on the Trans-Canada Highway. After clarifying their suspect was not a member of the RCMP, they announced they'd taken him into custody. In fact, Wortman is dead. He died after a confrontation with police at a gas station near the Trans-Canada.
At one point during the course of the evening hours, he appears to have been wearing, if not all, then a portion of a police uniform, and that we believe that he was driving at one point a mock-up or a vehicle that was made to look like an RCMP police cruiser.
RCMP say his murder spree left multiple people dead, including a female RCMP officer. A male officer was shot and drove himself to hospital.
We are all in shock that such a thing could happen here in Nova Scotia. And it is a heavy burden to bear on top of COVID-19.
My hearts go out to everyone affected in what is a terrible situation. I want to thank the police for their hard work and people for cooperating with authorities.
Wortman was a denturist. He worked out of this office in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Sources say he owned property at Portapique Beach, although he was not well known among people who lived there.
My sister knew him because he's a denturist, and she just had new teeth made by him, and she thought he was salt of the earth.
A big question, what changed that forced people to cower in their homes all night, hiding from a killer?
You're locked down in your own little house, and yeah, it's pretty scary.
It's something it's not going to happen here, but it happens.
It took hours for the RCMP to say that 14 people have been killed, including the suspect. They had to retrace the suspect's every move. They had to see what other crime scenes there might be in other communities before coming out with that increased death toll. Robin?
Ross Lord in Halifax. Thanks, Ross. We continue our team coverage with Mercedes Stephenson, who has been talking to the head of the RCMP, Commissioner Brenda Lucki. Mercedes, what was her response to the suspect having a uniform and a car that looked like it was police issue?
Well, Robin, like everyone else, she was astounded by how authentic the car looked. She told me that she didn't think that she would have been able to tell what that car was and that it wasn't real if she saw it on the street. And I've heard that from a lot of RCMP officers who've taken a look at the picture, that it looked extremely realistic. She said that she's absolutely stunned and deeply saddened by what has happened. I asked her if she's ever seen an incident like this before in her career, and this is what she told me.
Personally, I have not, and I hope to God I never see another one. Just a senseless type of event like this, where innocent people are being killed. There's just no words to describe it at this time.
It really is a stunning case. What about where this investigation is at now and the possibility there could be more victims?
Well, Robin, right now they are out scouring the various scenes looking for more. The commissioner told me that they are looking at vehicles at multiple properties, trying to figure out if there might be more victims in this really unprecedented case for Canada. We spoke a little bit about what the investigation looks like, and this is what she told me.
It's just an extremely dynamic situation that covers a large area with multiple scenes, buildings, vehicles. So there's going to be a lot of work ahead of us to get some answers.
Now, Robin, a lot of people are asking, what is the motive in this case? And right now we don't know, and neither do the police. Commissioner Lucki says that they're still trying to figure out what happened. At this point, they believe there's possibility that this started with one motive and at some point shifted into something more random, but they really don't know. They're trying to get as much information about this man as they can. They will comb through his computers, his social media, any information that they can get, but still everyone in shock at how realistic his uniform and car looked, and questions about that, whether or not that may have aided him as he was on the run from police. But certainly police all across the country are absolutely reeling with this tonight.
Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa. Thanks, Mercedes. Now to our other top story, the COVID-19 crisis. Let's take a look at the picture across the country today. More than 1,500 people in Canada have died of COVID-19. The number of confirmed cases has now surpassed 34,000. More than 550,000 Canadians have been tested for the virus. The Canadian government is considering how to kickstart the economy. It's a difficult balance because of fears of a second wave of the virus. The Prime Minister says Canada won't reopen overnight and that it's up to each province. Already, provincial leaders are beginning to plan how best to come out of the pandemic. Here's Jeff Semple with what Canada's exit strategy could look like.
I just feel like I'm in limbo.
Melissa Turner was planning to get married at the end of July, but now isn't sure whether they'll need to postpone.
If we're allowed to, say, have a small gathering, I'm thinking, to me, small is, say, maybe 15, 20 people. Like, it's pretty small, I'm thinking, but that might not be small enough.
For over a month, Canadians have been keeping their distance to slow the spread of COVID-19, and those efforts are paying off.
We're not out of the woods yet, but it looks like what we are seeing here is a bit of a slow swell. So I'm feeling a lot more encouraged than I was feeling, say, 2 weeks ago.
Sparking questions about how long this lockdown will last.
Many of the decisions around what makes sense in terms of a careful restarting of the economy are much more appropriately made at the provincial level.
And some provinces are faring better than others. British Columbia and Alberta are flattening their curves faster, with fewer new cases compared to Ontario and Quebec. Officials in BC and New Brunswick have suggested they might start lifting some restrictions next month.
If the curve continues, we would be able to look at bringing kids back to classrooms.
Internationally, some countries are already relaxing restrictions. Thousands of shops just reopened in Austria, their customers required to wear masks and practice social distancing. If there's no new spike in cases here, more businesses will be allowed to open in 2 weeks.
You know, small businesses first, businesses that don't require a lot of people in a small area. I think we're going to start to see that here in Canada as well in probably mid-May.
Some companies plan to implement mandatory protective equipment and temperature checks for employees.
So paramount, number one, is making sure that when we come back to work, that we're coming back to work safely.
Countries, including Canada, are scrambling to increase testing and contact tracing capabilities because even as the outbreak slows, the vast majority of the population remains vulnerable to the virus. And health experts warn that loosening the taps on the economy too quickly risks opening the floodgates to a second wave of COVID-19 cases. Robin?
Jeff Semple in Toronto. Thanks, Jeff. A COVID-19 outbreak at an Alberta oil sands camp appears to be spreading. The company confirms there are at least 18 active cases of COVID-19 at the Curl Lake mining operation, which is located about 70 kilometers north of Fort McMurray in Alberta. It's a 24-hour operation. Workers fly in and out for work. Now, those returning to other provinces for time off are being told to isolate for 14 days. Heather Yourex-West reports.
Hundreds of people come to work at Alberta's Curl Lake oil sands camp. Now it seems a growing number of those workers have also brought the new coronavirus home. Imperial, the company that operates this site, has confirmed that there are now 18 cases of COVID-19 connected to the camp, 4 on site and 14 others who have already returned home.
Unfortunately, I think that this was almost inevitable that this would happen, that we would start to see cases anywhere where there is work happening in close quarters.
Complicating this outbreak is the fact that workers fly in and out of the camp from across the country. On Saturday, the Saskatchewan Health Authority directed any returning workers self-isolate for 14 days. BC health officials are also watching this outbreak closely.
We do know that there have been some people who've returned home to British Columbia who were exposed potentially in Alberta and vice versa, and they are being monitored, self-isolating, being monitored by public health.
A memo posted to the app on Friday, April 17th, tells employees there is no need to self-isolate if you do not display symptoms and have not been directed to by Alberta Health Services through contact tracing. But infectious disease specialist Dr. Arnita Singh doesn't believe that direction goes far enough, given what we now know about how this virus spreads.
I think that it would be prudent at this point for everyone who has been in a camp where there have been documented cases to self-isolate for the 14 days.
Imperial says its guidance is in line with direction from Alberta health officials, but Alberta Health Services says any worker returning home from a camp with an outbreak should isolate for 14 days. Testing will also be available for all workers at the Curl Lake camp this week.
I think we have to remember that the test is only a snippet in time, and people can be incubating the virus and have a negative test, but then be positive later on.
But Dr. Bogoch says combined with extensive contact tracing and isolation measures, the extra tests should help officials get this outbreak under control. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
In an effort to set an example of social distancing, the Liberals have reached a tentative deal with the NDP and Bloc Québécois to reopen Parliament. It would see a limited number of MPs meet in Ottawa on Wednesday. The following week, a 90-minute virtual session would be added to the schedule to allow MPs to ask the government questions. In May, there would be 3 sessions a week, 2 virtual and 1 in person. But the Conservatives reject the deal and are calling for 3 in-person sittings.
I remain hopeful that the government will agree to our common sense proposal to continue to hold in-person sittings.
It has to be done in a responsible way, and right now the Conservatives are not taking a responsible approach.
If all parties don't reach an agreement before tomorrow, the House of Commons will resume Monday in person. Coming up, why the governors and the government in D.C. can't get along. Donald Trump is pushing to have American businesses reopen soon, even as the number of cases of COVID-19 climbs in the U.S. More than 760,000 Americans have tested positive for the virus. At least 40,000 have died. Now, 2 states will be getting back to business tomorrow, but as Jennifer Johnson explains, there's concern the move may end up costing more Americans their lives.
The governor of Texas feeling the heat and now bowing to pressure from the White House and constituents. His state, along with Vermont, will be the first to begin reopening some businesses Monday, while still requiring social distancing. U.S. President Donald Trump promising there are enough COVID-19 tests to begin phase 1 of reopening the country.
We have tremendous capacity.
But governors from both parties tell a different story.
That's just delusional to be making statements like that. It's just irresponsible because we're not there yet.
To try to push this off to say that the governors have plenty of testing and they should just get to work on testing, somehow we aren't doing our job, is just absolutely false.
The White House push comes as a new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll shows 58% of registered voters worry the U.S. will loosen stay-at-home orders too quickly, causing more deaths, while 32% worry the U.S. will take too long, harming the economy. As unemployment rates continue to skyrocket, White House officials are now promising more emergency funds this week to help small businesses decimated by the pandemic, after the first $350 billion to help those businesses ran out within minutes.
Because of that, we want Congress to approve more funds right away. We think that another $300 billion, that's what we're talking about, should be sufficient to reach almost everybody.
Relief for small businesses coming as millions of out-of-work Americans struggle to put food on the table. Food banks seeing more people than ever before.
It's a blessing, we can use it. We have 5 kids and then like 3 grandbabies at home. So right now, it's a big help to us.
Meanwhile, some signs of hope in the hardest hit states. New York reporting a drop in hospitalization rates as that state, along with New Jersey and Connecticut, reopened boatyards and marinas. In Washington, a Seattle farmers market is back in business with a hand washing station and time limits for shoppers. Small steps in getting back to normal before this pandemic shut the country down.
Thank you.
Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Still ahead, pandemic propaganda, how Russia may be spinning the crisis in its favor. It's being labeled From Russia with Love, a huge operation to send much-needed medical assistance to places hit hardest by the COVID-19 pandemic. But tonight there are questions about Moscow's motives. As Redmond Shannon reports, some say it's a smokescreen fueling propaganda during the pandemic.
Too many were not there on time when Italy needed a helping hand at the very beginning.
The European Commission President apologising for Europe's slow response to Italy's plight. The EU has since helped Italy, but much attention has focused on the Russian equipment and soldiers on the ground in the country for the past 3 weeks. At least 100 experts and military medics, according to the Kremlin.
We really don't know very much about the operation itself. It's rather secretive. Actually,
the mission, called From Russia with Love, was launched despite Russia's own struggles in dealing with COVID-19 at home. It's led by Major General Sergei Kikot, known for claiming that no chemical weapons were used against Syrian people in the 2018 Duma attack.
It's a large-scale PR propaganda operation to kind of underscore this kind of message that Italy is not getting help from its European allies and from its transatlantic allies and from NATO.
Given concerns about the risk of intelligence gathering, it's uncertain why Italy allowed Russian troops on the ground. But this Italian businessman was keen to show where his gratitude lies. And even amid arguments over how useful the donated equipment is, pro-Kremlin media have lapped up the welcomes.
It's not really false information. It's spin, it's propaganda, it's a kind of message to shape perceptions.
But there has been fake news too, and China might be at the centre of that. China has certainly generously sent help to Italy and other countries. But this video was tweeted out by a Beijing official. It supposedly showed Italians applauding the Chinese anthem, when in fact it's a doctored video of Italians cheering their own healthcare workers. The Chinese embassy in Paris has even been accused of spreading fake news about deaths at a French nursing home.
Russia and China both seem to want very different things out of this crisis, but they're going about getting them in exactly the same way. Now, China, of course, wants to deflect any blame for its early handling of the spread of the virus.
Amid the horror and tragedy, propaganda and spin are swirling in every direction. A war for hearts and minds as the world is on its knees. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Up next, how this Toronto couple found a way to sustain the line during the COVID-19 crisis. The pandemic is bringing out some of the best in people. And tonight we want to introduce you to the Canadians doing their part to help out. Abigail Beeman joins us now. Abigail, you've been speaking with some compelling people.
Robin, there are so many Canadians feeling anxious right now, facing challenges of all kinds, health, financial, social, and it's so impressed me to connect with some people who, despite facing those things, are using this time to give back and help others. I want to introduce you to a Toronto couple, restaurant owners, who, amid the stress of figuring out how to revamp to a delivery model and help their laid-off staff access EI, were committed to figure out how to donate meals to healthcare workers. Have a listen.
We were looking for a way to feed the nurses, because Chris and I have been talking about this since, March 17th. We need to get to the hospitals. We want to give our time and our food to feed the healthcare workers, the frontline workers. How?
Yeah, we just didn't have a contact before anyway to get the attention of somebody who could make the call.
So while they weren't quite able to figure it out themselves, they hooked up with an initiative on the same wavelength. It's called Sustain the Line. It connects people who want to donate meals to healthcare workers, helping them and helping restaurants stay afloat. It's already operating in a number of cities across North America. I'll tell you more about it, introduce you to a Canadian behind the project, and tell you how you can help in our Coronavirus, the New Reality special later tonight. Robin?
All right, Abigail, thank you so much. And you can watch that network special, Coronavirus, the New Reality, at 7 p.m. tonight and every Sunday right here on Global. Donna Friesen is host of that special, and she'll be back on the anchor desk tomorrow. That is Global National for this Sunday. I'm Robin Gill. Thank you for watching, and good night.